everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. Guys, it's the end of September. This is the very last Sunday before we get into the month of October. It's a little early, but we are going to be discussing all of the transits, or at least the most important ones for October 2022. I can't believe it. I know some of you guys are kind of like, what's happening in the meantime? So I will give you just kind of like a play-by-play, at least to get you through the rest of this week. If you're new to my channel, do me a favor, hit the subscription button below. Please subscribe. That way you are alerted as to when we have new videos coming out on the channel. Big shout out and thank you to all of the members, the subscribers, everybody who has been supporting Beyond the Veil. It's been a very busy year, but we've seen a lot of growth. We're going to hit 8,000 subscribers soon, which is really cool because we started somewhere around like 1,500 when I got back on YouTube. So it's just awesome to see the growth, and please, sharing is caring. It's going to help get that out to other people, give them some astrological insight, and help reach the goal of hitting 10,000 subscribers before the end of 2022. So if you guys can help me do that, I would appreciate it. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I am a Western and evolutionary astrologer with an emphasis on incorporating the Sabian symbols and the art of tarot into my readings. And yeah, we are going to be talking about all of the transits of October. So before we get there, I just want to say to everybody, happy new moon. If you're watching this on Sunday morning, happy new moon. Actually, the new moon's going to be hitting a little bit later today. So if you guys haven't seen my video that I put out on the new moon in Libra, do check it out. I put it out a little over a week ago, so you guys had a good heads up. Also, the Mercury retrograde video, it's very much kind of tied into this sequence of transits. Obviously, we know that new moons are when we want to set new intentions. But we're coming off the last couple of days of Venus's opposition to Neptune. So Venus has been hanging out in Virgo, and over the weekend was in opposition to Neptune. So lots of Neptunian themes with relationships and with money, needing space, needing time apart. Venus isn't totally happy being in the sign of Virgo. However, she is making some really nice aspects to Pluto. So getting organized, getting things cleaned up, getting things worked out, like hashing out stuff in regards to relationships is kind of like likely over the weekend as we're coming into a new moon, and then we're setting new intentions when it comes to relationships. So that's kind of really taking place all day today. Then when we get to the 26th, Venus is still in, conjunction with Mercury. So there's a lot of like rethinking relationships, rethinking schedules, rethinking the past, fixing things, working through things. And we're going to notice that there is going to be an opposition happening between the moon and also Chiron. So we've got the moon in Libra coming out of that new moon. It's going to trine Saturn and oppose Chiron. So it's like a lot of learning how to work together. I think the beauty and kind of like the benefit of Monday morning is how we can work better together as a team, and like communication is king. We're going to see some really nice air trines. Let me show you guys with the, not really so much the sun, I take that back, the moon in Libra in a trine to Saturn, and it's also going to be in a trine to Mars, okay? And over this week, we're also going to see Mars coming into a trine with Saturn, which is actually really cool. Even though Mars is in shadow, when in doubt, communicate. That's like the way through it. And that'll really kind of help you guys, get the week started off, okay? We come into Tuesday, the 27th. And this is going to be the moon coming into Scorpio, right? So guys, I've said this before, when we have the moon going through Scorpio or Aquarius or Taurus or Leo, we feel the fixed squares, whether it's a T-square or a grand fixed square. Usually the grand fixed square is when the moon is in Leo. So in this case, it's going to be a T-square. We feel that shift when the moon goes into Scorpio, like big time. We start feeling emotional changes, transformation. We can get a little bit more sensitive. We can be a little bit more touchy, and as the moon is approaching its own south node, it's a time to emotionally declutter, to clear out, to just dump everything out. So something that you'll notice the 27th as well as going into the 28th is that moon in Scorpio is like, okay, pay attention to how we're behaving, pay attention to how we're responding to things emotionally. The moon's going to continue to go through Scorpio, conjunct its own south node. So we want to decompress, release, and let go. And it's also going to come into a square with Saturn. This will be more on the 28th. And it's going to come into an opposition with Uranus. Now, whenever the moon's in Scorpio, we do deal with like crisis, drama, all that stuff. So a day to really pay attention to is actually more so, I think, going to be the 28th. So let me switch to that day. So then on the 28th, like I said, we have the moon square Saturn. Difficult time communicating and expressing ourselves to groups of people or friends. Moon in opposition to Uranus, we're feeling lots of emotional tension and instability. It does affect us, so like grounding and finding ways to better kind of stay in our bodies seems to be really important during this day. And yeah, I would just say keep your eyes out for the 28th. I believe that's Tuesday, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Not the easiest day. Whenever we also see that Venus is 29 degrees, so relating can be a little difficult. It can be a little challenging as well. And then we're going to get to the 29th. Moon will be leaving Scorpio. It's going to go into Sag. We're going to feel that ingress later in the day. So it'll be actually going into the evening. The moon will enter into Sagittarius, and then it's going to start forming a trine to Jupiter. And now we've got both the sun and Venus in Libra. So as the sun's going through Libra, the focus is going to be on Venus. Also really important because that north node is ruled by Venus. So we want to see Venus moving through, a sign that she's very comfortable in. Now we'll see this throughout the month of October. I'm kind of like indifferent. I mean, Venus is going to make some nice aspects. We're going to see Venus oppose Jupiter. So there's opportunities for big love, but also overdoing it. We're going to see opportunities also to really strengthen our relationship as Venus and the sun move to form trines with Saturn in Aquarius and also Mars in Gemini. Lots of air trines. I think I said in previous videos that like my favorite astrology for the rest of the year is going to be the first 2 weeks of October. After that, and especially as we're getting into the end of October, going into November, things do get a little rocky, okay? And then when, let's see, we get to the 30th, moon's moving through Sag. It's going to form some trines to Jupiter. I like it. It's also forming some sextiles to both Venus and the sun. So I kind of feel like, the morning and most all of the 30th, things are going to be a little bit easier to kind of maintain once we've moved out of that moon in Scorpio. And as the sun and Venus move through Libra, it'll make oppositions to Jupiter. So we see like where we can like benefit better in our relationships, kind of expand more in our relationships through self-awareness. Jupiter is still retrograde, by the way. Actually, later this month, we're going to see it's getting ready to dip back into Pisces. And that's pretty much it just for the week, right? So it'll take me to the first. Okay. So now from here on out, this is going to be me discussing the monthly overview for October 2022. Appreciate your patience for those of you guys who are like, what's happening this week? All right, so I'm going to go through all of the transits that I find to be most important. There is a lot to get through today. As always, we will be breaking this down week by week. So if you want to come back, we'll be discussing like the new moons, the full moons, and we'll go deeper in the weekly videos into some of the aspects and how it's playing out and just some food for thought from me. Libra season, right? So it is all going to be about partners, balance, relationships, working with other people. It's not just romantic relationships. It's just our one-on-one relationships with other people. Counselors, therapists, business partners. That's all going to be highlighted when the sun goes through Libra. One thing I want you guys to be aware of is that we're also building off of this new moon that we just had. Okay, so we had a new moon in Libra. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to have a full moon that's going to be in Aries, and it's an intense one. So we want to be flexible. We want to be trying to meet people halfway this month. It may be challenging, I know, especially as we get to the end of the month. In October, we're also going to see the return of Saturn square Uranus. So it's already kind of like within a degree. And it's funny, like every single time the square comes up, I'm always like trying to remind myself, the square is coming, the square is coming. And then it just like always catches me. So like the last couple of days, I've been like, what the hell is going on? It's been a square. So I did a video on this just recently this week on the channel, just reminding people that between, you know, the Mercury retrograde, between Saturn square Uranus, which is putting the pressure on old ways versus new ways, and also eclipse season, it's like, guys, the energy is, it's going to feel like you're turning the volume up. Okay. So you're going to start to kind of notice that things are getting a little bit intense. If you are a fixed sign, anywhere between 17 and 20 degrees of the fixed signs, right? Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, you're going to feel this square pretty significantly. Next week, I'm going to be having on the channel, I'll do the horoscopes. So that way you know how it's affecting each and every one of the 12 signs. But I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that square is coming back. We have planets going direct this month. We're going to have like a Mercury obviously going direct. We're having, I believe, Pluto going direct, and another planet. I'm just got to go through my list, but we're going to be having planets that are going direct, and we're also going to be having Mars go retrograde. So just keep in mind, the end of October, things really start to kind of shift. Scorpio season is going to happen. So Sun is going to go into Scorpio. That's going to be highlighting themes of regeneration, change, transformation, right? Anything in regards to starting anew, uncovering depths, and all that fun stuff. But I don't want to take away from Libras. If you're an October Libra and it's your birthday, happy birthday. And if you are a end of the month Scorpio, happy birthday to you as well. And then I guess like the finale at the end of October is kind of two parts. We're going to have a solar eclipse that's going to be in Scorpio. We are also going to be having a Mars retrograde that's going to be in Gemini. The more that I look at the astrology, I'm like, wow, this month is going to be a real banger. There's going to be a lot of content that's going to be made this month to really kind of unpack all of this. So if you want to grab a pen and paper, or if you'd like use your digital calendar or whatever, you know, now is a good time to get that out. We're going to go through the transits. And like I said, I will break these down. I'm going to pick the most important ones that I think for the horoscope videos. So I'll talk about that as we kind of get into that next week. And as a reminder, like I said, because we have eclipses at the end of the month, we're going to start feeling that eclipse energy, like very early. We start feeling eclipses a couple weeks prior. So in spite of that, I want you guys to realize that a lot isn't really going to fall into place until closer to mid-month, because we're kind of working out of the Mercury shadow. We're waiting for planets in Libra to trine Saturn and help us solidify our goals with other people and like figure out how we can like be better in relationships or friendships. We're also going to be seeing that planets in Libra are going to form trines to Mars and Gemini. And I think that's going to be about motivating others and communicating other people and trying to open lines of communication and making it possible for us to work together and work through separations or like limitations, okay? Because these eclipses are so significant in terms of their aspects, I'm going to do videos. They're not going to come out until probably a little bit later in the month. And I thought it'd be a really good idea to do a webinar. I've been doing a lot of webinars because I'm trying to kind of focus more on teaching. But I've got a webinar coming out on October the 9th. That's going to be on a Sunday. It'll be 10 o'clock a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern. If you want to join the webinar, it's all going to be about the fall eclipses. I'll talk a little bit about them today. I'm going to talk a little bit about that more in the horoscope, and I'll do separate videos. But if you're somebody who wants to get ahead of that, if you want to learn about the eclipses, how it's going to affect you, how to best navigate them, what the themes are, we've got a solar eclipse in Scorpio at the end of the month that is exactly conjunct Venus in its fall. And we have got a lunar eclipse that's going to be taking place on November 8th. That's going to be in Taurus, conjunct Uranus and square Saturn. So some very, very, very significant astrology is basically setting up with these eclipses. And I felt like it was worth, doing a webinar and being able to talk about that. So if you want to join me, please join me. I'll put the links below. You can take a look at all that information. Obviously, always happy to have like new students. I've been trying to put these webinars out so people who can't commit to doing like longer programs, or if you're just wanting to get more in-depth information and learning how to work with some of these cycles, I'm going to give you guys lots of insight on how to work with it ritually, especially because the very first one is going to feature Venus. So my lecture is going to be talking a lot about Mars and Venus themes. And it's really helpful in the midst of Libra season. We're gonna learn a lot about our relationships. So consider joining me for that. Okay, so thanks for letting me get that out of the way. Let's talk about the transits. We're going to start with October 1st. We've got Venus in Libra. Let's see, is there a way that I can put this out here? here without going back and forth? Let's see. It makes it difficult for me to be able to use the screen bar. So that's why you guys see the thing come back and forth. So I apologize. We've got Venus in Libra. Okay. Coming into opposition with Jupiter. Venus is happy in Libra. You know, this is where I was saying I'm kind of neutral. I think that the Venus in Libra transit is going to be a nice break from having Venus in Virgo. However, Venus is going to be pretty much hidden behind the sun until we get to the end of the month. And it really won't be visible. And that's when Venus pulls ahead of the sun until we get to Sagittarius season. So Venus is not going to be in like all of her glory, basically. She's going to be in a trine to Mars, so she'll be passionate, working behind the scenes with others. She'll make a trine over here to Saturn, so she's helping kind of solidify and like focus on goals. But she's not going to get her like usual kind of star-studded attention that she's used to getting if she was ahead of the sun. Towards the end of the month, right before the eclipse, we're going to see for about 3 days, Venus will actually be moving with the sun. And there's going to be a new star point that's going to happen. Venus will cazimi with the sun. I'm going to do a separate video on that. But yeah, I don't think that we're going to get our usual kind of enjoyment out of Venus this month, unfortunately. In like traditional astrology, they say that Venus is like hidden. But with Venus in opposition to Jupiter, that's big love, opportunities for relationships at a distance, opportunities for growth, but also overdoing it, overeating, overspending, right? Over relationshiping. There can be like too much togetherness. And I think with the sun being so close to Libra, we're going to see these themes of like balance and fairness and beauty and harmony. And the question is that are relationships helping us or hindering us, right? Are they helping us grow? Like, can we see that there can be so much love and support from others that it really encourages us to be willing to be more independent or be more fearless or more courageous or more capable or more willing? Really interesting dynamics just to see Mercury going back and forth over these degrees in opposition to Jupiter several times. Then Venus shows up and goes, you know what? Even in spite of the difficult challenges that have happened over these last few weeks, you know, my partner has been there to be supportive, or my business partner stuck by me, or my best friend, you know, was there for me. So there is a lot of appreciation that I think that can come from the Venus in opposition to Jupiter. We can be more generous and more giving with like our love and our affection as well. Big love stories and things can kind of happen with that. But watch for overdoing it. And being that these are in cardinal signs, they're very action oriented. So we can see like big dramatic, you know, ways of showing love and appreciation. I think that somebody could be like, I flew across the country to be here for your, you know, graduation, or, you know, I came all this way just to like tell you, you know, how much I missed you, or, you know, sending big bouquets of flowers and things like that. So there could be some real grandiose kind of ways of showing love and appreciation for other people with that. Likely this is going to tie into the Mercury retrograde. So if you have seen that Mercury going back and forth over the early degrees of Libra has been about getting feedback from other people. I think it's been a lot about feedback or giving feedback to others, because oppositions are relational. So it does kind of stay like there's this back and forth that you've been having about your beliefs or your freedom, or, you know, how you're spending your time, or whether or not you're open to relationships. Once Venus shows up, it's going to add a little bit more sweetness to whatever these conversations have been. And we can find that relationships can actually improve once we have just, you know, Venus being in this sign. So you can find that through kind of the breakdown that's been happening in the Mercury retrograde, there can be an unveiling of like more harmony and more peace in relationships as well. Okay, so now we move to the 2nd, and on the 2nd, we're going to see that Mercury is going to go direct in the sign of Virgo, okay, right here. And with Mercury going direct, you know, we can see some wonkiness, like the same way when we're looking at the pre-shadow, like when Mercury is getting ready to retrograde, like, you know, there could have been issues with communication or electronics. Yes, technically the Mercury retrograde is over on the 2nd, but my issue is that it's still in opposition to Neptune. Still hazy, still bad communication, still bad reception. Even though Mercury is very happy being in the sign of Virgo, something is very clouded and unclear. What's unclear? Schedules are unclear, health issues are unclear. work schedules, travel schedules. I mean, we see wonkiness when Mercury goes retrograde, right? I several times throughout this cycle, I've been like, I didn't see that email, or I forgot this appointment, or like things like that have kind of come up for me. And I blame it on Neptune with just like overlooking things or not seeing things. And so if you're like a stickler and you're like, I'm waiting till Mercury retrograde ends before I sign the contract, or this or that, sure, you can wait until that, but I will just give everybody this like heads up and this warning that things are still not clear, and it's not going to be like Mercury retrograde is over and then everything's like really easy. No. I think I would wait until Mercury either within a few days comes into a trine with Pluto, where you've sorted through all the details and you feel more comfortable and confident with whatever you're committing to, or I would wait until it comes out of the shadow. So it has to leave about 8 degrees of Libra, which will be closer to mid-month. And you start seeing like, Mercury coming into a trine with Saturn. That's what I would recommend. I think that communication is going to be the clearest actually right around mid-month. Anyway, even though it's stationing opposite Neptune, and that's where it started. So if you look back to what was going on at the end of August, right? That's when I think we were coming into the shadow. You may find that, stuff is that was uncovered, and you've worked some of that stuff out, or conversations that weren't had were finally had, whatever. And you're going to get more clarity. And I'm liking, like, especially going into the third, like when the moon is in Capricorn and it's trining Mercury, that's also going to help us kind of make sense of stuff. All right, so Mercury goes direct. We're going to be over Mercury retrograde, even though there might be some stuff on the tail end. Just keep in mind. Then I'm going to take you guys to the 6th of October, where Mercury comes into its third trine. Okay, this will be later in the day, with Pluto. Now, this has happened several times during the Mercury retrograde. If you guys haven't seen my Mercury retrograde video, take a look. I talk about how Mercury starts in Libra, retrogrades back into Virgo, so it's about organizing, getting things kind of set up, getting ourselves set up. Virgo in the 6th house is like my routine, my eating habits, my health, my whatever. It's like what you need to work on before you meet others. So I have found that there has been this realization through the retrograde, I think, that's like we got to get our own stuff in order before we can really show up for other people. And where there's relationship breakdown or disharmony, it's likely because we're not doing the things that we actually need to be doing, or organizing, or like setting up for ourselves. So 3 times we will see Mercury trine Pluto. Great for like research and uncovering information and digging deep. And perhaps maybe even this is the day, like I said, that you're thinking about signing something or committing to something, or you're like, okay, we've finally looked through everything and now we feel better about whatever's being agreed to. Especially at a 26, it is about resources, stability, security, food, right? Control, what we can control physically. So yeah, watch for that third trine. It's a part of something that's been trying to be worked out for the last couple of weeks. On the 8th, we're going to see that Pluto goes direct in Capricorn, okay, at 26. Kind of cool how that all kind of synchronizes, right? Like, Mercury comes back into the trine at 26 degrees, and then hours later into the next day, Pluto goes direct. There's some connection there where Mercury and Pluto are working together, and whatever Mercury has uncovered and relayed back to Pluto, it's been like, okay, you want to have more control in this area? This is how you do this, So it's very physical, practical also because it's happening in Earth-related signs, so that's kind of cool. When outer planets go direct, do we always see something? No. But because Pluto is a heavy hitter and it's about major change, major transformation, just a reminder, if you're a Scorpio rising, or if you have like a really strong, presence of planets in the 8th house or Scorpio, you may feel this more. It's just about like a power up period. This was the very last Pluto retrograde before Pluto goes into Aquarius. Now I'm going to talk about that more in the new year, but Pluto going into Aquarius, it's going to cross the late degrees of Capricorn in the new year. And it's going to be about the most strength, the most seriousness, the most limitations, the most responsibility. Like whenever we have a planet hit 29 degrees, that's like, it's very extreme. And it is a Saturn degree because it is associated with Saturn in general. So now that Pluto is direct and it's in the third decan, we're going to see power in the world, because the third decan is dealing with things globally, is going to reach epic proportion. And Pluto in Capricorn is about the government. It's about big business. It's about institutions in general, right? So if we think back to like 2020, as Saturn went in and out of the late degrees of Capricorn, we saw lockdowns happen. So Pluto's now coming up to the late degrees, and we're going to see like how much control governments are wanting, and the fact that they don't want to give that up. But for you guys on a personal level, I would say look at where Capricorn is in your chart, because as Pluto is coming up to the late degrees, it's wrapping up what's been like years of major change and transformation. Pluto has been in Capricorn, I believe, since 2008. So if you look at where Pluto is in your chart, it's been, uncovering and digging things up and bringing all this stuff, to the surface that can be painful and uncomfortable. So now we're not going to have any more Pluto retrogrades before Pluto goes into Aquarius. Now next year, Pluto will only spend, I think, about like a month or two in Aquarius, and then it'll retrograde back to Capricorn, and then in 2024, it will have moved fully into Aquarius. So it's going to give us like a little sneak preview of what Pluto in Aquarius is going to look like, and then it's going to head back into Capricorn, and it's going to say, hold on, we're still working on things. My point is that now that Pluto is direct, all of the internal change and transformation and things that we're breaking down and kind of clearing or letting go is now going to become more visible, okay? So if you're a Pluto-based chart like a Scorpio rising, you're definitely going to feel this one kind of wake up. It's going to pack a little bit more of a punch. Okay. More on that later in the month. October 9th, we have got a full moon in Aries, conjunct Chiron. So that's a biggie. Here we go. So it's going to be a 16-degree full moon in Aries. So anybody who's got planets between, let's say, 14 and 18 degrees of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, it's going to affect you the most. Obviously, Aries, Sun, Moon, and Risings, pay attention. This is, I won't go too much into detail, but this is a big moon because it is going to be conjunct Chiron, so it's about emotional wounding, especially relating to like female figures or maternal figures, anything in regards to women and their bodies, because Aries deals with like the physical body, and it's coming into an opposition with the sun. Every full moon is a sun-moon opposition. And also Venus. So moon opposed Venus is like, do I nurture? Do I not nurture? Does this feel good? Does it not feel good? And it can represent some tension in regards to relationships, and is what is good for relationships necessarily good for us on an individual level? That's what I really like about astrology. I mean, I think that, I've said this many times, it's really 6 signs with polarity, and like polarity we really see during the full moon. So even while we have like the sun and Venus in Libra and it's together and it's relationships and all that stuff, the moon in Aries and Chiron in Aries, and also the earth is currently in Aries, is saying in order to find that peace and harmony and like flow in relationships, it takes a whole lot of like being aware of like our faults, our shortcomings, like our moods, what we need to work on a personal level so we can show up better. And yes, when we have this full moon, it can bring people together, but it can also create lots of tension and disharmony in relationships, forcing individuals to kind of go back to the drawing board, start working on themselves. So, for the most part, that conjunction can be painful, basically, with Venus in opposition to Chiron, the pain of separation. And then the full moon is putting a highlight on where individuals are not entirely sure if they can fully show up into relationships. Thankfully, at the time of the moon, we do have a sextile to Mars, and that is the ruling planet. And Mars is in shadow and retrograde, its retrograde shadow. So at the end of October, it's going to go retrograde. And Mars is also in a square with Neptune. So it's a lot of like, what are we fighting for? Like, where are we going? Like, what's the purpose? Like, what are we sacrificing ourselves for? And then Mars will also trine Saturn. So I'll do a whole video on that, but it's like, the best advice I can give you guys is the best way to get through Libra season, or October in general, which I think is going to be pretty pleasant for the most part. When in doubt, communicate, because we have so many air trines. It's like ask friends for advice, talk to counselors, get readings, ask for support, like, work with other people, like work through things, because it's gonna be worth working through things from what I can tell. We have now got on the 10th, Mercury is going to re-enter Libra. So it'll leave Virgo, it goes into Libra. When it's in Virgo, it's like, let's fix this, let's organize this, let's label it, let's break it down, take it apart, let's heal it, let's clean it up. When Mercury moves into Libra, it's a lot like, well, what do you think? What do you want? You know, what's best for you? I don't know, what works for you? And so there is a sense of it being positive for like mediation. Look at whatever happened when Mercury was originally in Libra, you know, in this last month. You'll kind of see that it's still in the shadow, so it still has to get to about 7 degrees before it clears out of that. There can be a little bit more indecisiveness going on with that as well. You will then see going into the next day on the 12th, Mercury is coming into an opposition with Neptune again. So Mercury, ideas, information, travel, communication with others, Libra, in an opposition to Jupiter. Like, I actually think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to take space. Maybe that's already happening. Like in the midst of like relationship stuff or friendship drama, or, you know, if you're not getting along with a significant other, part of Mercury's opposition to Jupiter is like, let me take 10, or let's, you know, take a break, or like, give me a week and I'll call you back. Like, let me reflect on things. And so I wonder if like this early October period when Mercury is coming into opposition with Jupiter is like, here's what I've realized about my situation and like how I could be better, and like a lot of room for self-reflection. Because Mercury has made 2 previous oppositions to Jupiter, likely there's been a lot of, like I said, learning about yourself through your relation with other people. Oppositions are relational. It does involve others, and Libra requires us to kind of do a little bit of like a back and forth dance with others. I always say, like, you know, it takes 2 to tango when you're dealing with Libra energy. So it can be 2 parties being at fault. It can be 2 people who are not seeing eye to eye, or 2 people who equally need to kind of work through their own personal dynamics before they can kind of come back and have something to really bring to the table in a relationship. So you can see that coming up in October. On the 11th, we are also going to see that, well, actually I go back in time. I'll take that back. I missed Mars trine Saturn. So Mars was in a trine to Saturn on earlier in the month. What am I looking at? Where is this thing? Oh, it's Mars square Neptune. I take that back. So on the 11th, sorry guys, retrograde. On the 11th, Mars is in a square to Neptune, not a trine to Saturn. So Mars square Neptune, like I said, a lot of like, what am I fighting for, right? Mars in Gemini has teeth. So it has stuff to say. It needs the freedom to communicate and also move around, and it's Aries, so it needs to be given like the space to do so. And when Mars comes into the square with Neptune, this is important because Mars rules the South Node. Passive aggressiveness, vagueness, getting frustrated, feeling flustered, stuff like that can be coming up very suddenly because it's at a 23. Mars square Neptune can also be like depleting energy levels, or there can be a sense of needing to take caution with what information you get. Because Neptune deals with screens and Gemini deals with the media, I'm going to tell you guys right now that the Mars square Neptune is like the media having a field day and things being manipulated and people kind of fanning the flames of whatever kind of gossip or drama is kind of going on at that time. Especially when it comes to global events and war, because these 2 are going to square, it's saying that there's stuff that's being manipulated or not factual. And I have said also in the midst of the shadow, pre and post retrograde, because we see Mercury in opposition to Neptune and a square to Mars, like there's not a lot of clear information. There's a lot of miscommunication going on. There's a lot of misreading things, misunderstanding things, and things being taken out of context. So before you go starting any fights or any conflicts or anything around the 11th, make sure that you really know what's going on. And here's the beauty, right? Still, it's a 5-degree trine to Saturn, so calling and asking and checking sources or getting feedback from a friend or another person is important. And we've also got planets in Libra that are moving into a trine with Mars. So, you know, when in doubt, talk about it. It's like, you know, ask a friend what they would do, or talk to a therapist or a counselor and say, hey, I'm struggling with this thing. I'm really angry. I don't know where this frustration is coming from. Obviously, Mars can also deal with driving, communicating, short distance trips. I have a feeling that there is going to be some major issues with travel. Okay, Mercury is still in its shadow. So until Mercury gets to about 8 or 9 degrees, we're still in shadow. So Mars coming into square with Neptune is saying like there's going to be some misleading information probably about travel going on, or about cars, or about vehicles. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. All right, what else? So then on the 11th also, the sun is in a trine to Saturn, which I really like. You want to think of Saturn as like laying the cement and the foundation for something. Like it's really stabilizing something. So Libra, the sun in Libra is shining a light on relationships and people who support your goals and your motivation and what you need. So you have to look at your chart individually, but just know that, Libra does have other people that come in. So there can be some like really nice opportunities for, people to support you in whatever your goals are in the Aquarius area of your life. On the 12th, we're going to see Mercury in Libra oppose Jupiter in Aries. So that's wrapping up. You're going to see that actually earlier in the day. It's going to be the 11th and in the morning of the 12th. That's the third and final time. Then on the 13th, you're going to see Venus in Libra come into a trine with Saturn, all at an 18. So it's really interesting. Like that number keeps coming up, right? We saw Mars North Node Uranus come into conjunction in Taurus at 18 degrees. 18 degrees is the degree Uranus retrograded back from. Now we're seeing planets trine Saturn at 18 degrees. 18 always deals with health, organization, clients, the service industry. It's a Virgo degree. So definitely a lot of the information that's coming up is like about health. It's relating to health and our schedules and our daily routine and like getting back to work. But when the sun and Saturn trine, it's really similar to when Venus and Saturn trine. I think the sun comes first and highlights, hey, this is my goal. You tell somebody what you need help with. You tell somebody what you're hoping to achieve. Venus comes into the trine and says, okay, how can I help you do it? What's very interesting to me is that in the midst of this trine, which is lovely because you really can feel like, yes, relationships get solidified. You have conversations. You make business partnerships. You bring on new clients with these trines. In the background, Venus has been in conjunct Uranus. So it's saying, we have to get out of our comfort zone. We have to do something different. We can't always do it by ourselves. Sometimes we need the help of other people. So this is why I've said that the air trines are really highlighting all month long the need to really kind of communicate and get out of our old and rigid and routine ways of doing things. On the 17th, so it'll take you ahead a couple days. On this day, we see that the sun in Libra is going to be trining Mars. So that trine between the sun and Mars is happiness, joy, glory plan, movement. I love seeing the sun and Venus conjunct in a trine with Mars because it's not just going to be the sun. Over the next day into the 18th, we see Venus as well trine Mars. And Venus trine Mars is passionate. It's really great for relationships. It's really great for harmony and working with each other and everybody kind of like doing their part, especially because Gemini talks about two, and communicating with more love and more appreciation. Like that's why I really kind of like mid-October. I think mid-October is some of the better astrology that we've seen probably since about June. What else do we have here? So the 17th, sun in Libra, trine Mars. So we're motivated. We're feeling passionate about our dreams because it's out of 24 and about our intuition and, what we're hoping we can achieve in the future and visualizing and talking about what our desires are. Then on the 18th, like I said, then Venus trines Mars. Okay. But what we have going on the 19th is that both the sun and Venus are starting to come into a square with Pluto. So while it's really positive and we're motivated, we're realizing that in the midst of this motivation or maybe changing direction, like I think Mars and Gemini is about like that fork in the road or like an opposite, option or choice, that we can make. We realize that we are coming into some friction where there's some power struggles now that Pluto is direct and Venus and the Sun are in a square to Pluto. Sun square Pluto, power struggles, solar figure issues, bosses that can be overbearing. We might see a significant man in, the media, transition, somebody who is very loved with that Sun in Libra. And whenever we see Sun square Pluto, there can also be like issues relating to like the ego or issues relating to the heart. And I think that it's a little bit more potent being that, we have Sun and Venus forming the square to Pluto. It's kind of like we have to let certain things die. We have to let certain relationships die or certain imbalances go. But thankfully, this is still trining Mars, so it is going to lessen the blow. It's going to be like, well, I'm no longer choosing this, I'm choosing that. So therefore, I have to, quit my job or leave the relationship or whatever. So there is a way out, but I would still just be really mindful of some of those Sun square Pluto issues that can be popping up. 18th, 19th, 20th. It'll definitely be in the air, that's for sure. Okay, so then on the 22nd, here, got a lot of things going on this day. So Saturn is going to go direct. And like I said, if you guys are watching, I kind of glossed over that. But the 20th, 21st, 22nd, notice how we see the Sun and Venus moving together, right? So Venus was behind the Sun up until the 22nd. And on the 22nd, we're going to have the Venus-Sun Cazimi. So Venus moves ahead of the Sun. The first time Venus has been visible in a while. Not really visible, ahead of the Sun. So something significant is emerging about new relationships, patterns, things like that. Venus won't be totally visible until she gets into Sag, but still, it's a superior position. 29 degrees, the aneretic degree. It's the now or never degree. Okay, 29 deals with the most excessiveness in regards to relationships or that intricate kind of balance. I've seen 29 associated with separation, legal disruptions and issues, sometimes even divorces. So it's going to be interesting to see as the Sun is coming into conjunction with the late degrees of Venus and then Venus pulls ahead of the Sun. I think there's going to be huge news that's going to be coming out about Venus-related topics, women, reproductive rights, health. I also think new styles are possibly emerging. And being that it's in Venus, it's very feminine. So we might notice a pattern or a trend that's kind of picking up over like the next couple of months and even into the next couple of years, because this is a new Venus point, that we're turning back to more feminine type energies. Like dresses might be more in style, being more feminine, things that are more kind of like softer, more romantic. I think of like blushes or like piano music. I mean, Venus influences all of this stuff. How we dress, what we eat, what we find to be beautiful or romantic. So it's setting up for the excessiveness in terms of those degrees. I did a video talking about star points with my friend Donnie a couple months ago. We just did another video on relationships, but I know he's going to be putting some stuff out about this because that's like his forte, is talking about this star point. So maybe we can, I'll get some links for you guys so you can see what he's talking about. But if you're a Venus related chart, so if you are a Taurus rising or a Libra rising, very significant because a new point is kind of emerging and that's your chart ruler. So make or break things going on in relationships is what I'm anticipating. Maybe you're feeling that for some time, the days up to that as a result of the squares that were already happening to Pluto. There can be some new things coming out in the market about money. Venus at 29 degrees, I find it hard to believe that it won't be. And also that this is the moon in a balsamic phase. So we're clearing things out, right? This is when we're like emptying out our closets and cleaning out our car and cleaning out the fridge, and we're kind of grumpy. There's just like a lot of stuff that's kind of getting cleared out. So the astrology really from like, I would say the 21st on, it's almost just going to be like a forest fire. Like everything is going to happen very quickly. And then we have an eclipse. So just know that as we're in this balsamic phase and we're getting ready to come into what's going to be a new moon, already people get kind of like, oh, stuff's kind of spooky. There's like a weird vibe in the air because it feels like something's ending, but it won't just be a new moon. It's going to be a new moon solar eclipse. So this same day, Saturn will go direct at some point later in the day. Saturn goes direct at 18 degrees of Aquarius. And we are also going to have like I said, the Sun-Venus conjunction. So Venus ahead of the Sun. So significant stuff about money and relationships are going to come out. That seems like dire. And we're also going to have Mercury in Libra coming into a trine with Saturn. Now, by the time you get to like the 14th, 15th of October, just a heads up, you're out of the shadow. So anytime from that moment on, you're in the clear. If you really want to wait, though, I think something about Saturn stationing and Mercury trining is like there is some big news coming because, you know, right before that new moon, the moon's going to come into conjunction with Mercury, right? And so there's going to be something that's going to be released that's going to be definitive, probably by politicians, about taxes, about money, about budgeting, about spending. I'll talk more about this in the eclipse videos when I do my webinar, but just know that a solar eclipse in Scorpio, things change financially very quick. And usually it's not for the better. Usually it's quite crisis oriented, and it will be in conjunction to Venus. So I'm anticipating with the 22nd that as soon as the moon is getting in close proximity, okay, it's going to be closer to the 23rd, 24th. As soon as the moon's getting into close proximity with Mercury, that news is getting ready to break. And when Mercury and the moon come together, because the moon is about the collective, this will be the early morning of the 24th, that news is breaking. That news is breaking because Mercury and the moon is sharing information relating to balance or relating to fairness or partnerships, and it is going to trine Saturn. The sun will have just entered into Scorpio. So the sun enters Scorpio, you know, early on the 23rd, actually. And then in the 24th, the sun and Mercury will conjunct. And then we're getting ready to come into the eclipse. So you'll feel this, like, honestly, I think as soon as like the sun and Venus are squaring Pluto, you're already in that energy because Sun, Venus square Pluto is like very Venus in Scorpio. It kind of reminds me of that, like that pressure of like, is it safe? Is it not safe? Do I open up? Do I not open up? So you guys might start looking around as early as here, the 22nd, and you're like, whoa, something's going on. No, even earlier than that. That's when it's 29 degrees here, the 19th. The 19th and the 20th, as soon as these planets start coming into a square with Pluto, because it's the closing square, right? So it's everything that's been going on since literally like the Venus retrograde in Capricorn that was taking place at the beginning of the year. And when 2023 starts, we're going to have a Mercury retrograde in Capricorn conjunct Pluto. So where, you know, the beginning of this last year, they were like, oh, things are going to get better. Don't worry about inflation. Don't worry about the markets. We're going to realize that we're just like back at square one and like things are going to get a little dicey in terms of that stuff. Okay, so let me go back to where I was. So we talked about the 22nd, Saturn going direct. So, you know, this is the last retrograde that Saturn is having before Saturn goes into Pisces next year. So no more Saturn retrogrades in Aquarius. Those of you guys who have really prominent placements, I would say like 17 to 19 degrees of the fixed signs, you're going to feel this because you have Saturn come into that square because he's waking up. We have the return of the Saturn-Uranus square. It's actually happening much earlier in the month, but it won't square exactly like it did in 2021. We had 3 of them, but we're feeling that all month long. Saturn wants us to commit to something, long-term goals. It's also about separation and isolation. Uranus is dealing with anything in regards to fluctuation and change. So we will see shortages. We will see supply chain issues. We will see issues with the internet. We are going to see that there is going to be some need to kind of restraint or kind of keep people from wigging out about resources, food, money. And when all these planets come into Scorpio, we have the eclipses, which will oppose Uranus and square Saturn. Likely there is more financial instability that's coming that Saturn is going to try to wrangle in, right? More on that if you guys want. Check out my Uranus, my Saturn Uranus square video. We go to, let's see, we're at the 24th. So the sun has already entered into Scorpio. Venus is going to enter into Scorpio as well. Both of these ingresses are actually happening on the 23rd. So the sun goes into Scorpio, Venus goes into Scorpio. Boom, boom, very quickly. And it's like such extreme Libra energy, and it's nice because it's been in a trine to Mars and a trine to Saturn. And there's been a lot of talking about what we're going to do. And then when we get into Scorpio season, it's like, okay, we talked about this. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. And we may not respond to it so well. Also, I'm very curious about this day. This wasn't even on my notes, but I'm seeing it. Sun and Venus at 0 degrees. Quincunx Jupiter. So Jupiter is saying, okay, you want to expand, you want to fly. You got to be willing to take a leap of faith, jump off the ledge, make the change. You know, fly the coop or leave the nest. Something about this, it tells me that there's a lot of Mars energy in the skies. Mars is getting ready to retrograde, and we're getting ready to come into that Scorpio eclipse. It's just, this energy is quite intense. The 25th is when we have the eclipse. So this will be a new moon solar eclipse in Scorpio at 2 degrees of Scorpio. If you have any planets between 0 and 4 degrees of Scorpio or the fixed signs, this is an eclipse that will affect you. And I know the fixed signs are going to be like, well, I'm just got out of the Saturn square. Like, yeah, but if you have early degree Scorpio, you're going to feel this. Personal planets too. So it's not just sun, moon, or rising, but if you have Mars or Venus or something, pay attention to that and what house that planet rules. If this is your birthday, I really recommend getting a reading because you have an eclipse on your birthday. So it can be really helpful to know because it means it's going to be a very active year ahead. South node solar eclipse. South node, what we're moving away from, letting go of, right? Solar, active, even though new moons are like, we get quiet. This is not a quiet new moon. It's saying, what do you love? Get really passionate about what you love. I guess that's the positive way of looking at it. Venus is not comfortable in Scorpio, right? Usually we like to see Venus in Libra or in Taurus or in Pisces. So technically, you know, Venus being in her fall, she's very uncomfortable. She's not happy here. Very different than Virgo. This is like she's scary. She's intense, she's fearful, she's passionate, she's angry. It's a very Mars kind of based Venus. Now, if this happens to be your Venus return, in that case, it's going to be very active for you. So I would say pay attention. Scorpio rules, obviously, other people's resources, taxes, inheritance, death, regeneration, transformation. It's at a 2. Okay, so collectively, everybody's about to realize there's about to be a shitstorm financially coming. And 2 deals with physical money and something about crisis and like loss because it's a South Node eclipse. When the eclipse starts, we are then in an eclipse portal. That's what people call it, an eclipse portal. I'll play along for now. It is a portal. It's a period of time where we have the one eclipse and then it's going to be the bridge to the second eclipse. So while we're in that 2-week phase, it's like anything goes. I always tell clients like, some of the craziest things happen in between eclipses because doors are opening, doors are closing. So depending on where Scorpio is in your chart, take a look. It's a South Node eclipse, and it's highlighting the fact that you need to set intentions revolving around some things that you love. Inevitably, we got to let them go. All right. And that's kind of like the beauty, I think, of like Scorpio. Scorpio is saying inevitably time's going to run out, money's going to run out. You know, we're going to eventually have to say goodbye to that person or whatever it is. And so it teaches us to be present in the moment and really enjoy what we have when we have it. So this eclipse will be active and you want to watch, you know, even the following day because you're going to see that the moon is going to then on the 25th going into the 26th, it's going to, come into conjunction with the South Node. So actually the next day, there's still a lot of fallout, moon conjunct the South Node, and that's over, that ended. And we're gonna have the moon oppose Uranus, so it's how we respond to what we have lost or what has been cut out. And then the moon squares Saturn. a lot of these Saturn-Uranus square themes coming back. It's like, if you really want this to be your goal, this is what you have to do to get there. This is what you have to be willing to release and let go. And South Node Moon Scorpio is like toxic emotional behavior. Yelling, screaming, crying, not willing to go with the flow, not letting go, not releasing. It's been such a weird thing just being somebody who has a Scorpio, having all these planets, like watching these eclipses and like watching the squares. And like the only thing that's really gotten me through has been reminding myself like, oh, look at how much you respond to like letting that go. Like I'm trying to observe. I think that's like the healthiest way to kind of manage Scorpio energy is to observe like, oh, that's a sensitive area, or talking about that, or thinking about that, or addressing that, or looking at that. Usually where there's a little bit of discomfort, at least in these transits at the end of October, it's worth really taking a look at. Like you have to kind of clean the wound, and there has to be a willingness to kind of go, you know what, I can't keep behaving in this manner if this is actually what I want to create. And for many people, you know, we don't realize that the North Node in Taurus is like creating beauty, pleasure, right? Having stability, being able to spend time outside in nature, being able to feel financially secure, and also giving our nervous system a break because it's on overdrive with North Node conjunct Uranus in Taurus. So we've been living in a way that's very opposite to the North Node Uranus, which is, yeah, shit changes. Money comes and goes, but things that money can't buy are some of the most important things. And I think that's what a lot of people are going to be realizing through these eclipses. That's like, if you're getting thrown off by whether or not, you know, you're going to be able to afford a brand new car, or whether or not you're going to be able to, you know, afford expensive or luxury things, like if that's scary for you, then yeah, this might be a harder time. But if you're somebody that's like, things you can replace, it's not the end of the world. We need to focus on, you know, letting things go, clearing things out, being more sustainable maybe. So I think some people are going to start thinking about. I'm anticipating like more energy shortages. I mean, we know this is coming. More issues also with fluctuations with the market and perhaps even cryptocurrency. It's kind of hard to determine which way it's going to fall because eclipses are kind of like, you never know what you're going to get. In the oppositions to Uranus, I feel like is because a lot of people are going to be feeling destabilized by what's going on with increases probably at the end of October going into November. We're going to see probably interest rates continue to go up. Inflation is going to continue to go up, and people are going to kind of panic buy or sell. So I'm not going to speculate which way it's going to go, but it's going to definitely swing with these oppositions. And then we see the moon start coming into a square with Saturn. And that'll be really in play until the 26th. So we're coming off, you know, whatever happened with the eclipse, realizing something's going to change, we got to let it go. We feel how that impacts us and the pain of limitation and letting go, and the opposition to Uranus where we get triggered and go, how many times are we going to get disrupted? How many times are we going to have our peace disrupted before we go, you know what, actually, I'm just going to completely stop responding to things in that way emotionally and start focusing on how I can create more security. So just know that this eclipse is it's gonna rumble for a little bit. And we will be feeling that energy clear until the 8th when we have the second eclipse. On the 26th of the month, Mercury re-enters, no, that is not right. Mercury Trine, there we go. Mercury is in a trine to Mars here. So Mercury, Libra, trine Mars. We got to do this. We got to do this now. How do we work together? You know, how do we problem solve together? Or we talked about this. This was the plan. It's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. So working well with others, inspiring and encouraging other people, motivating other people. But then we start seeing Mercury coming into a square with Pluto, unfortunately, the next day. So as Mercury is coming into a square with Pluto and Capricorn, intense conversations, intense words. Keep in mind this is now a closing square. So all of these planets, right? Venus, the Sun, Mercury are all coming into like a last quarter phase before they all come into conjunction with Pluto again, which will be at the beginning of the year. This is when we're wrapping things up, right? So it's like, I'm afraid to tackle the debt. I'm afraid to quit my job. I'm afraid to say goodbye. Like these are things that kind of happen with this period. Mercury square Pluto, watch your words, can be intense. This same day, Jupiter is also retrograding back into Pisces. That's kind of interesting. So we've got Mercury square Pluto, quincunx Jupiter. Big energy in regards to communicating. Jupiter is the traditional ruler of Pisces. So, you know, on one hand, I look at this and I'm like, well, we're going to have Jupiter, Neptune, and Pisces for about a month or two, and psychic emotional energies are going to be really high. You're going to hear things about global isolation, or, you know, people who are being, you know, kept away, or people who are being, you know, put in hospitals or centers. You're going to possibly even hear that they're kind of drumming up saying, oh, there's more virus stuff going on, because when Jupiter and Neptune were together, we did see higher numbers during the pandemic, and a lot more people. I mean, I've seen a lot of people that got sick during that conjunction. So I think that they're going to be kind of bringing up the fears relating to like, oh, well, is it safe, you know? Really high psychic intuitive levels. So if you're an empath, if you've got a lot of planets in late degrees of Pisces, just know that Jupiter shifts more into not having any bounds. So it's boundaryless. Be really great for spiritual stuff. I mean, Jupiter, when it's in the last degrees of Pisces, has brought a lot of isolation for people. But I think Jupiter, Neptune, and Pisces is kind of saying like, sometimes when you're with the masses, you're absorbing all of that. And when you take time alone and you can reflect and detach, you can actually have more of like a connection to source. Obviously, we do see more uptick with, you know, psychological, mental, emotional issues with this conjunction, drinking issues, you know, the list goes on. So there is a darker side to Jupiter being in the late degrees of Pisces. Meditation, self-reflection, and the willingness to go and take time alone in nature or time to meditate is really the remedy for this. I'll do a video on Jupiter going retrograde back into Pisces. I think I did a video on Jupiter in Pisces way last year. I started talking about it and I put a video out, I think like spring of last year. Maybe I'll do like a reshare on that. But once Jupiter gets back into this sign, I'm going to do a video and talk to you guys about my 2 cents. It's not going to be there for long. It's only going to be there for about 2 months. Right around the end of December, it's going to start getting ready to come back into Aries. And it's only going to drop down to about 28 degrees. So it'll be in the last 2 degrees. So, you know, more dreams, more spirituality, more intuition, kind of being more checked in. But in the midst of Scorpio season, having all these planets that are going to be trining it, and also watching Mars getting ready to retrograde back and square it again, lots of confusion and energy drains, unfortunately. On the 27th, we are also going to see, well, yeah, I guess we kind of have not just Mars in a square to Neptune, it's kind of in a square to Jupiter as well. It's a loose square. It's not going to be exact because Mars is getting ready to go retrograde, but it's worth mentioning. Then on the, is it the 20? It's the 30th. So then on the 30th, Mars goes retrograde in Gemini. It's like 7 months of Mars in Gemini, you know? So Mars is going to go retrograde at 25 degrees of Gemini. So if you have anything around 27 to, let's say, like 24 degrees-ish of Gemini, or the mutable signs, you're going to feel this the most. Mars rules passion, courage, drive, you know, desire, fighting, you know, and especially Mercury. In a Mercury-related sign, it's like arguments with words, and like there's gonna be lots of like keyboard warriors and like lots of people arguing, and you're gonna see lots of talking heads on the networks and stuff that's being spun, 2 different narratives. Basically, if you're a Mars-ruled chart, so if you're an Aries rising or if you're a Scorpio rising, you want to know where Mars is retrograding. So for an Aries rising, it's retrograding in your 3rd house, so there can be slowdown or challenges or issues with moving, writing, learning, traveling, vehicles, siblings. Scorpio risings, it's going to be going retrograde through your 8th house, which can be very difficult because it's about changing and transforming the mind and like how you think, and like psychological stuff comes up. And there can be more conflicts and issues in regards to like you and intimacy with other people, or you being able to address like documents or conversations relating to joint assets, resources. There can be stuff that comes up also about death and inheritance. I did a Mars and Gemini video, but I'm going to do a video through the retrograde pretty soon. So yeah, lots of good content to talk about this month. Obviously, there's a lot going on. And just know that Mars, when it slows down in its retrograde, similar to like a Mercury retrograde, right, or a Venus retrograde, it's closer to the sun, so it's felt more strongly. So, you know, when Venus goes retrograde, we have issues sometimes in relationships and finding harmony in relationships. So when Mars goes retrograde, we don't really get along. Mars is closer to the sun. We argue more. There can be more conflict. And my advice is having Scorpio eclipses, Scorpio season, Mars retrograde. It's like, oh man, I can't think of anything scarier on Halloween than Mars retrograde. I guess there'll be some good like horror movies that are put out, some good slasher movies. But we're going to see Mars-related things kind of slow down, or we're going to start to realize that, you know, we are fighting about things and arguing about things online or locally or with other people, or there's more road rage or whatever. It's just like in the skies, you know, and we're more prompted to get frustrated. Mars is also about fire, and it can be about weapons. It can be about war. So I'm speculating that, you know, Mars going retrograde in a square to Neptune is, we're going to be hearing changing narratives about both the virus as well as vaccines, as well as scheduling and whether or not it's safe to go back to work, go back to school. We're also going to be hearing from a lot of like Gemini type characters, or new narratives relating to certain news stations, and where they're kind of fanning the flames of stuff during like election season. Because here in the States on the 8th we have midterms coming up. Well, there's also an eclipse on the midterms, so that's going to be interesting to see what's kind of coming from that as well. But yeah, Mars going retrograde, just know that wherever Mars is in your chart, it's already in its shadow right now. So Mars will actually go retrograde all the way back to 8 degrees. So Mars will go direct in the new year, but it's going to hang out in these degrees really up until almost right around March. So lots of extra work going on wherever Mars is in Gemini for you, okay? Then on the 31st, we have Halloween. So it's going to be interesting to see what is going on with these eclipses. Like I said, this is the first eclipse that's going to then be bookended by a lunar eclipse in Taurus, which is generally usually pretty good because we like to see the moon in Taurus. But that November 8th eclipse is going to be exactly conjunct Uranus, in opposition to Venus, and in a square to Saturn. So that tells me that whatever shakedown is going on with the solar eclipse in Scorpio, it's like magnified right around the early November period, right around the time that we see that closing eclipse. That will dramatically affect the world market and what's going on with economics, like 100%. And I think that moon conjunct Uranus is like the floor falling out, or like the rug being ripped out from underneath something. And then there's the square to Saturn. So it does suggest that politicians or governments or whatever are going to have to intervene with whatever chaotic situation is going on financially. And likely this might be like the big disruption. Everybody keeps being like, oh, the reset, you know, and talking about digital currency and like what's going on with like the central banks. Like you're going to see some really big things that are going to happen. That's going to probably be pretty dramatic. The weeks to follow, it doesn't necessarily have to happen at this time. Remember, eclipses pan out over time. So we're going to see more of this actually unfold in February of 2023 and also in April, May of 2023. No coincidence that at that time Pluto is going to go into Aquarius. So I think some of the further breakdown we're going to see take place, you know, basically during October and November. That's paving the way for them to offer us new solutions in the new year. So it's going to be quite wild, guys. Hopefully this is helpful for you. I'm just trying to be as positive and optimistic as I can be. The truth is like the first half of October is really the best astrology for the rest of the year, in my opinion. Working with those squares and working with those trines is probably the way to go. And asking other people for help and asking other people for support and like really focusing on nurturing and caretaking to the relationships that we have in our life. So as things get difficult or challenging, we realize that we've got people that, you know, support us and have our back, and that, you know, we can pick up the phone and call if we need some kind of help or assistance. So really make the most of that, I guess, is what I'm saying in the midst of the month of October. Let me know. Is it your birthday during the eclipse? How are you feeling about these transits? Have you been looking at these transits wondering what is going to happen as well, like I have? What are you anticipating for the Mars retrograde? Leave me comments below. Let me know. I would love to hear. As always, guys, I'm always happy to help. On Saturdays, I am generally almost every Saturday live on the channel. So I post a link usually. We alternate every other Saturday. We do tarot readings, we do astrology readings. So you can come and join me. It's always 7 p.m. Pacific time, 10 p.m. Eastern. You can make a donation and you can get a reading. So if you're going through some of that stuff, you can participate and ask questions. I always have content coming out pretty much almost every other day on the channel. So as we go through these transits, we're going to unpack it further. We're going to talk about it a little bit more. I've got that webinar on the 9th that's all about the eclipses. So if you want to get a head start on that, you want some recommendations, you want to know how it's going to affect you, join me. The links are below for that webinar. And also, you guys can check out my Midheaven podcast. So I do that with Mike the Peace Stealer. We have a new podcast coming out every Monday. We're going to talk to you guys all about comedy, have some drinks, talk about what's going on in the cosmos and world events. So if you need something a little bit lighter, you can check that out. And my books are almost completely full for the rest of 2022. If you want to get a reading before the end of the year, I recommend going to my website. You can go to my links below at beyondtheveiltarot.com. You can get on my calendar. I have some time open available in November and December, but likely in like the next 2 weeks or so. The rest of the year is going to be booked out. Super busy because I'm also teaching. So if you're interested in learning tarot or astrology, those lessons I have available on my website for sale. And I'm going to be starting a level 2, so it'll be Astro 201 in the new year. So I'm going to be putting information out about that soon in the next couple of weeks. So if you want to learn intermediate astrology, if you want to learn about returns, solar returns, lunar returns, if you want to learn about composite charts and synastry, and if you want to learn about transits and how to start making astrology make sense in terms of more advanced methods, please do consider joining my mailing list. You'll get information as to when that class goes live and you can join my class. Okay, guys. Happy October. Let me know how it goes. You can come back to this video and stay tuned because I am going to be putting some stuff out about the eclipses later this month, and horoscopes are next week. Okay, until next time, I'll see all of you very soon. Take care.